You know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I am your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I am your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we assign our guests a year and they choose one punk, hardcore, emo, post-hardcore, screamo, pop-punk record from that year for us to talk about. And today we are joined by PJ Sykes. He is a Richmond-based musician, previously played in bands Hoax Hunters, and he runs the record label Cherub Records, who just celebrated their 20th anniversary. He just released his first full-length studio album, Fuzz, and it's a really, really great record, and this conversation is a lot of fun.
I'm really glad we got to talk to PJ. We've been aware of him for a while, and I've been thinking since we started this show, we should have him on. At least once we started having guests, he was definitely in my mind. So I was very excited to get to talk to him. It was a great conversation. Today, we are talking about the year 1989, and the record that PJ chose for us is Spy Rock Road by the Lookouts.
One that neither one of us were familiar with going into this episode, so
yeah.
We get pretty in-depth on this episode about a lot of different things. You know, as usual, we're very divergent, especially in the beginning of the show.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was all relevant to the conversation, and certainly to the year that we're talking about, if not necessarily the record. But there's a lot of history attached to this specific record in this band, which we'll get into if you don't immediately know. I'm not sure how many of our listeners are well versed in this period of punk.
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly. We kind of have the gamut of age groups, it seems like. This conversation with PJ is really great. Talking to him was very much... It felt like we've already known him for a long time. It was one of those kind of easy-flowing conversations.
Yeah.
So, this is a really good one. If you want to hear more of us rambling on, you can check us out over on Patreon, for $1 you can get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. This week we are doing a 5x5, and as we're recording this, we haven't done it yet, so...
Yes, I do hint at one record that I'm going to talk about on my 5x5 at some point in this episode. I think it's towards the end.
Yeah, and of course, you can also pledge $10 and get access to, and actually pick the album we talk about, which should be coming up soon. We've got our first one of those. I'm going to have him relinquish that $10 tier so that someone else is eligible to pick it up, but very soon. If you're interested in that tier, just message me too, and I can almost even just save it for you. So
we'll make it work.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And
we had a lot of fun recording that episode. I really hope more people take us up on that, because it was a little different.
Yeah, for sure. I really, really enjoyed that one. Definitely want to do more of those. You can follow us on all forms of social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We're at punklotopod. We have an email address as punklotopod@gmail.com. We have a voicemail. It's 202-688-PUNK. And we have a Substack.
Yeah, punklotopod.substack.com.
And I think that will do it for us today. So please enjoy this conversation about the Lookouts.
When you found it
PJ, you just released your album Fuzz in May, and I want to say I think I listened to it the day it went on Bandcamp, and then it went on Spotify a few weeks later, right?
Yeah. Bandcamp for the first month, and then June 4th was the official, I guess, release, wide distribution. Spotify, Apple Music, all those giant corps.
Yeah. So I've listened to it probably twice now. I listened to it again this week, just kind of refresh for the show, and
Thanks.
It's such a great record. I really enjoy it. It's really, really fun. Like, I don't want to use the word power pop, but there's a pop sensibility to it, and it's got real driving, fun, fuzzy guitars, so that kind of fits. But how's the reaction to it been?
Surprisingly good. I've been putting out records and music for over 20 years now, and it's hit or miss. Like this is the record, man. This is gonna be the record, and then like literally no one checks that record out. You're like, why? Like that was the best one we ever did. Like you liked the last one. We had that a little bit of that going on in Hoax Hunters, where you release a record and people get excited about it, and then you do the next one and you hear birds chirping, and but yeah, with Fuzz, it's been different. I think it just hit the sweet spot. And I thought about this, usually when you make something, it's like trying to get people to step into your world or your aesthetic or your thing or whatever you're doing. Like, come over here and enjoy this content or this record or this movie or this whatever you're doing, right? And with Fuzz, it's about literally what we've all been through, right? It's kind of, you don't have to invite people too far. It's like this, what did you do last year? Here you go. This is my expression of what we are living through and what we just kind of went through, and some of the other stuff it's adjacent to it, right? So I think it's just an easy record for people to understand and get into with that in mind, not that Hoax Hunters or other things I've done haven't been, but it's and it's also got my name on it, which I think, people go, oh, you're in a band, and then that they forget. But when it's your name, it's been a different experience. People check it out differently, or they have a different opinion about it before they hear it or something. You guys have heard Hoax Hunters, so it's not too far off. It's the follow up to Clickbait. It's a little different. It's got a little bit. It's pushing in some different directions, but it's me. I mean, that's kind of where we were going.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Hoax Hunters. I really love that band too. Never got a chance to see it live, but to me, this record is almost like a chronological next step for what Hoax Hunters was doing. So, like, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, so, that's exactly how I viewed it, and I almost released it as a Hoax Hunters record, but I thought it's not. Nobody else is on it, and it really needed to be a solo record. But to me, it's the same thing,
Yeah, definitely. Dylan and I used to always kind of compare it to Husker Du, Hoax Hunters. Yeah. And then this record, Fuzz, feels more like the type of music that was coming out after, like
Sugar Husker and things like that. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Like Dinosaur Jr. Like early early SST stuff is like right up my alley. And then the progression out of that into the other stuff. And that's kind of what this podcast today is about, almost like 1989. I think that's kind of fitting, because it's like, I love, Minor Threat and Black Flag and early American hardcore and that sort of thing. But what I love more is Husker Du and Dinosaur Jr. and the more melodic, weirder things that are out there. I like that stuff more. And so that's what you're hearing on Fuzz, I think, is that, definitely thinking about Hoax Hunters, it was more trying to be a power trio. I didn't want to put too many extra guitars on there because I wanted to play it live with just guitar, bass, and drums. And Fuzz really is a 2-guitar band, maybe even a 2-guitar keyboard band or something like that. So it's definitely a bigger sound. It definitely is pushing in a little bit different direction, but it's not far off.
And I hope it doesn't sound like I'm saying like derivative of just like, well,
no.
Middle 80s, now late 80s. Like,
no. No, I don't think so at all. I think that's a good, description of it. And that's kind of where I was thinking too, for sure. When I started making this record, I thought we were going to be stuck at home for 6 weeks, 6 weeks was a long time. I was like, what am I going to do with myself? I got bored after 3, and I was like, well, I guess I'll just record a couple songs. I don't know. I don't have anything. And I'll just, I was trying to play some power poppy kind of stuff, and I just started writing riffs, and I was like, whoa, there's like 14, 15, 16, 17 ideas here. I guess this is a record. And I just went and just kept going. And then I was like, oh, we're going to be home for a while. 6 weeks is not that long now. And so I started taking vacations and staying at home, obviously, and just instead of clocking in from 9 to 5, I just sat where I'm sitting right now and just played guitar for 40 hours and re-recorded stuff and wrote stuff. And so I really didn't have intentions of making a record, and it just kind of happened. And I was like, well, I'm bored. I'll just keep going. And I feel like I guess I just needed to do it anyway. It'd been a few years, and also all this stuff going on. This just kind of kept me sane, And so that's kind of where it led the direction of what that record came. And I think that does align with the sound of it, and the progression of moving from the hardcore stuff into the poppy stuff, or whatever you want to say, or early to late 80s, and that kind of progression, that kind of thing. People were starting to think of things differently, and it wasn't so insular, or like, people were hearing things. It wasn't just like your friends. It was going to be a wider audience,
Yeah, kind of tying that into our year that we're going to talk about today, like towards like the end of the 80s anyway, it seemed like nobody really cared all that much about like punk music, quote unquote.
Yeah,
and it was very much like everybody was doing metal, or more like just what was becoming alternative rock, like post-punk was turning into gothic rock, which we'll discuss when we get deeper on the charts a little bit. But it's 89 is an odd year.
Yeah, it really was. I was like, oh, 89 is going to be great, and it was. But as I think I always say that if I could go back in time, it would be 1987, because that's really when things really start changing, and that's where like a lot of bands, like Black Flag just broke up, and now there's Rollins Band, and now Revolution Summer just ended, and now there's all these great DC bands, Fugazi, whatever. Like everyone's just starting, Public Enemy, like like the idea of what we think of this big appeal music of the bigger bands of this type of thing were all kind of rooted in this weird switch around 87. So I was like, okay, 89 is probably when they started putting out records, and it's maybe more like 88 or 90 or something like that. There's a lot of good records in this year, but they're kind of a weirder versions. A lot of their weirder records are this year, for the band that you might associate with those things.
Yeah. Before we get too far away, I wanted to talk a little more about your record. So is this your first truly solo record?
I did a solo record in high school. It was my first attempt at recording, I met up with my friend Jeff Roop, and he, in high school, the last play that I was in theater tech and band and marching band and all those kind of things, but I really want to play guitar, and I was teaching myself guitar. Nobody would play music with me. They were like, oh, you're too weird. You play too fast. People were playing like my high school was really into Chili Peppers and like the funkier stuff, or what a Dave Matthews Band, or like those kind of things were getting to be big. And like that stuff's fine, but I didn't know. I was gravitating towards like, Weezer and Green Day and Foo Fighters and those kind of things that were starting up, those bands that were starting up. That kind of stuff appealed to me once I found it. So everyone's like, oh, you play too fast, you play too weird. But Jeff was making music for this play. And we did Ashes, Ashes, which is it's based on the Who concert where people got trampled to death in the 60s or 70s. It's a play based on that. And so he wrote the music for that. And there was a live band on stage. And so they had tryouts for the second guitar player. And I tried out thinking, I'm not going to get this. Everybody else is the guitar player in this school. And I got it. And so I became friends with Jeff. And that summer after we did the play where we played on stage as a band and all that stuff, I just went to his house and we started recording all these songs I had written. And it's very poppy, kind of like, why don't girls like me? That kind of dumb shit or whatever. This song's about being angry, this song's about being sad, like just real obvious shit that, you write about when you're a teenager and you don't know how to write or anything like that. But the songs, if you go, I've listened to it, I don't know, not that long ago, and the songs were pretty good, at the structures and things like that. I mean, the lyrics and the singing were terrible and the performances weren't good, but the idea of the song and how I was writing is not very much different from what I do now. But that was a long time ago. And so I that's never going to come out. You're never going to hear that music. Maybe you'll find a thrifted cassette tape out there somewhere. So this is technically my second solo record, but I've recorded all these different things over the years. I've been in bands, and technically there are some solo songs out there, or there's other recordings I've done, but this is really it. This is the solo record.
How are you finding the adjustment? I guess circumstance is kind of why it wound up being a solo record, I guess. But like, how do you enjoy the change, or are you still like, no, the second I want a full band again?
I love collaboration, and I definitely tried to collaborate on this record. It just didn't work out. I had a couple of old bandmates play some parts, and it just didn't feel right. Like, it's hard to get the feeling right when you're making something you don't know what it is yet, and they're in a different place, physically, but also like we can't connect, on the same emotional level because we're in different houses across the city, doing different things during a pandemic, and whatever else is going on during the election year. I mean, it's just brutal, right? And plus, I live in Richmond we all experienced the summer we did last year with all the protests and stuff, but Richmond was definitely, massive things going on with the monuments and stuff. So there was just like, it's just, just heavy. So everyone was kind of a different space. So just the collaboration didn't really work on this record, unfortunately. But, the biggest difference is putting your name on it. People kind of, like I said, knew I was in a band, but then they forget quickly that I played music, a lot of times. And they're like, oh, you're a photographer, you're this and that, but they don't remember that I played music. And so it's undeniable that that's what it is with my name on it. So that's been really weird for like your average person that going like, you made a record? Like, yeah. I made a bunch of records, but yes, I made this record, but so it's like, it's a big deal. Like putting your name on it, it's like kind of scary. So the biggest thing is like name recognition for that has been weird. For your average person that knows you from doing other things, definitely knows you have a record out versus you said your band's record came out and they immediately forgot it, because they don't know that band name. When they see it a couple times, they don't associate it with you. But yeah, I can't wait to play. And I obviously am not going to play. If I play solo, it'll be just like electric guitar solo. Like I've done shows like that, Hoax Hunters shows and stuff like that too. But yeah, I'm looking to try to find some people to play music with, and we'll play some of these songs, maybe some Hoax Hunter songs, or we'll see where it goes. Yeah,
for sure. Hopefully, we'll get to see you soon.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do some dates out of Richmond.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens. This year's a bit weird. It seems like the fall is going to be pretty good. So, fingers crossed.
I was talking to Dylan yesterday, and it was just like the week we're recording this, which this episode is going up fairly soon after that, so it'll still be kind of fresh for everyone. But like every band decided to announce their tour yesterday.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I was just like, oh my god, you're gonna go broke. All that money you saved last year is gone.
Yeah.
You're going to have to pre-order everything, too.
Yeah.
Because it's going to sell out. Everyone's so excited to be able to go to shows again that you're just going to have to buy the ticket 8 months in advance.
Yeah, and hope you can get the night off, or, hope that you still want to drive to wherever to see that show. Yeah, I've already messed up and didn't buy a couple things. We just bought tickets to see that Haim St. Vincent show, Merriweather, which will be pretty fun. And Jason Narducci's coming through. We're going to see him. Dinosaur Jr. I think is coming through. Not Richmond, unfortunately, but there's I think Bob Mould's playing soon. 9:30 Club.
I bought a Bob Mould ticket. That was the first ticket I've bought in a long time.
Yeah,
and I wasn't sure if I was going to buy it when it went on sale, and I was like, I don't know. And I went ahead and did it. And
I think it's the right. Sometimes when you see your favorites come through, and you're like, I just saw them. Like, but you enjoy it. Just go.
Yeah.
Like, why are you denying yourself? It's like you're gonna be bored on Wednesday night when they come through. Just go to the fucking show. Like, it's gonna be fun. You love that music. You love that band. Like, why would you not go? So like, I don't know. It's kind of like, just buy the ticket. If you don't go, sell it to somebody or trade it for something. But
there's been so many times where I was like, man, I would like to go to that show, but it's a weeknight, or it's like a night I have to work the next day, and you're just like, I don't want to be tired at work. But then like months later, like I say after the show passes and you didn't go to that show, and then like months later you're like, you're not going to remember that, well, I went to work and I was well rested. You're going to remember
Right.
that, oh, I didn't go see them last time they came through and I wished I had.
Yeah, like that was the last time they played that song or whatever it is, you know, and
Yeah.
like Jesus. Yeah, I mean, just go. And if we've learned anything from last year, it's like just try to enjoy life, man. Like go see things, go support your favorite artists and musicians and movies or whatever. Just who cares, man? Like go do it. Like if you like it, go do it. Support them. Especially like these bigger bands, like they're most of them are doing okay. They probably have some money squirreled away, just like the rest of us, but everybody who supports those guys, the guitar techs and the roadies and the people who run the venues, and they need the money too, so getting back out and seeing your favorite bands is important, not just for the band but everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, the greater music industry.
Yeah, so go buy that ticket, for whatever it is that you like.
And before we move on, you also operate Cherub Records.
Yeah.
Which has also been around for 20 years now. This is the 20th anniversary, correct?
Yeah, this 20th anniversary. We're gonna be announcing some stuff soon. I'm keeping a secret. I'll tell you. 5 years ago, we put out a 15-year anniversary compilation with lots of stuff on the archives. We're gonna do another one of those. We're running out of really cool things in the archives, I think, but this has got to have some pre-Cherub stuff on it, some weird stuff, and then there's gonna be a Hoax Hunters couple of songs on there that aren't out, and I'm pretty excited about that kind of stuff. And then I just got a record back in my position that I was in a band called A Nude on Fades before Hoax Hunters, and it was an instrumental sort of experimental band, and I'm gonna reissue that record with some other stuff that is like a live record and that kind of thing. So
that's awesome. Even though you've been playing music for longer than the record label's been around, I guess none of those projects were like existed the entire time. So I guess to me, I feel like, wow, 20 years on like one specific project, which is just your label. But I guess that's an accomplishment of something that like I've personally not experienced yet. So how is that?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's it's just the glue that holds everything together. So I really am influenced by Discord and things like that on the label side for sure, and Teen Beat and things like that, where it's like just trying to keep things in print and make things available and like dig up some old stuff. Like to me, it's like, who cares if that band's not playing anymore? Like you can still listen to the record. Like why? Like we still listen to things that we like that are 30 years old. Like there's labels out there now that just put out stuff that no one's ever heard of that's 40, 50, 60 years old. Like, and people are like, whoa, this is great. So like, I don't understand why we are always, hyped on what is the brand new thing that's out. Like it has to be brand new and just made all the time. And so the label is kind of a mixture of all that stuff. It progresses, and it just holds on to all that old stuff and tries to put before YouTube, we had videos, and I was trying to put together like a VHS compilation so people could see some of the bands that played, but didn't get to Florida or whatever. Here's a VHS copy, and so I have all these tapes that I converted, 5 or 6, 7 years ago and put them on YouTube that I never did anything with. But holding on to that stuff is cool because then you can put it up on a thing like YouTube that didn't exist when we had captured it, So I don't know what's going to happen next, and you don't either. We didn't have digital music when I started, or it was kind of, it was like MP3 downloads, or it wasn't iTunes quite yet, you know what I mean? So that's kind of, why I do that, why there's Cherub. It's just to keep up with that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everybody, I feel like most people have an all-time favorite album from a band that doesn't exist anymore and hasn't existed for 20 years, even if not more, so yeah, there's no point in just being like, I only care about new stuff. Like that's kind of one of the things that Dylan and I really like about this show is that we get a chance to dive into things that came out 20, 30 years ago that we're not familiar with, or it's a classic, and we're trying to be like, well, what makes it a classic, like that kind of thing. So
yeah. We definitely appreciate people who keep things alive, too, because there's been plenty of things that we have come across on our show that we can't can't talk about because it doesn't exist on anywhere to listen. Like,
right.
Unless we like soul seek it.
Yeah.
This is a great example, and I was excited that I could do this record today because of all the other stuff. And to me, like the label, in my case, ties everything together, and it has a narrative, and I'm trying to string along. Like if you get into me because of Fuzz, then there's a lot of catching up you can do. Or if you get into something else that's older, I have a new solo record. You know, like what happened in between. That kind of thing is interesting to me. You know, telling that longer story and seeing an artist or a group of people evolve over time, and you know what kind of things were they into, and how do they deal with these different technologies at the time, and how did they use those things to, or you know, but yeah, like it's just kind of interesting now that you can have these labels that can tell these stories, but if you don't document it and you don't have it in the archive, or you don't bother to take photos and videos, then you're never gonna, you know, like I try to save, whenever we play shows, try to save people's Instagram photos of us and stuff when I can, because who knows if they take the account down tomorrow, you know? Like you think it's going to be there, you know? It may not be.
I mean, I've even had it where like an artist I love took down all their music off of Bandcamp.
Right.
Like,
you just don't know.
That's yours. You can keep that there forever. And then for whatever primarily it's probably like a creative reason, or they were unsatisfied with how it came about, but somebody enjoyed it, you know? Like there's something to be said about like the ownership of music and being like, oh, I wish nobody would hear that. But like if it was out there and you put it out there for people to hear and they liked it, you know, then it becomes, I guess is what the death of the author, conversation. So like you put out a record, but then like 5 years later, you're like, I wished I hadn't put that out, and you delete it from the internet. But you know, those other people who were enjoying it for 5 years, you know, it's like still kind of theirs.
It's like a weird thing, because like, you know, obviously artists, you know, you can say author or musician or whatever, you know, they are hopefully, you know, changing over time, and so like a lot of times people don't like things that they did a few years ago, you know, because they've moved on. And to me, like, you know, I have that conversation a lot with my friends and stuff, and I'm like, well, do I think all the stuff on Cherub is great? Would I put it out today? Maybe not, you know, but it is a document of what it was. And so I really appreciate it as what it is. And then you can, you know, polish it up a little bit to keep putting it out, but you don't want to change it too much, or you want to kind of keep the spirit alive, or, you know, but, you know, would you make that record again? Probably not, you know, like I would say it differently, or, you know, so it's kind of a weird thing to look back on your own stuff, or delete it or change it or whatever.
Yeah, I also think people forget that like there is a context with it within what people release their music through. So like if you know you hear it a couple years later and you're like, this too many bands sound like this, but it's like, well, at the time, did there? Or like, or if there were, it was part of a greater sound that was happening. So yeah,
right.
Context
or was this band first, you know, or whatever.
Yeah. So context is kind of important when you go back listening to older music too. So.
Yeah. That's what's great about this time period too, is that nobody, a lot of people don't have the same sound. Even in the same scene, they have similar sounds, but they're kind of different. And I think we're getting there now again too, because there's just vast amount of different things that people are into, and choices that they can use, and pedals and things like that. But so I think we're kind of coming back around to that now, especially after last year. I think we're going to see a lot of weird stuff and different sounds and vibes.
Yeah, I've talked about on the show before about like how like 2020 was horrible for a multitude of reasons, and even within the music industry. But even then, there were a lot of amazing records that came out last year. Mm-hmm. Like 2020 was a strong year for records.
Yeah,
the creative output makes it one of the better years for music. Obviously, like, you know, venues closing down and no one, you know, able to tour and make a living making their art was not good.
Right.
Yeah. Easily the worst year for the industry.
I mean, you know, sometimes this is gonna, I don't want this to sound bad, but you know, this halt of industry is going to probably lead to some kind of innovation too, because I mean, look at schools and stuff. Everybody's had to pivot and use Zoom and things like that, and work and things like that. So some of that stuff's going to stay around, and some of it's going to get better. I mean, even Zoom, like if you used Zoom last year, how crappy was it the first time, and how much better was it by the end, because they kept improving things. based on feedback. They weren't getting that much feedback before. Now they have like way too much feedback, and they know exactly what people want in a product. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think the same thing is true about art and music and stuff. Like you've got this time on your hands and endless resources as far as like, ways to record yourself on your own computer and things like that now. We're going to see some innovation in products and ways of thinking and how people perform, or they don't perform, or they don't tour, or they tour in different ways, or venues are going to do different things too, I think, to survive. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. And I don't think nothing's ever going to be back to normal 2019 style. It just won't be. No. It'll feel like that maybe at a lot of places, or things will be, we can go back to doing a lot of those things, of course, but there'll be different ways of doing things, or slightly better ways of doing things, or maybe we'll still wash our hands more, hopefully, or people wear masks when it's cold season or whatever, what I mean? Like, just kind of simple things, but, I don't know, maybe there'll be more virtual shows on top of regular shows, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I've definitely seen, and I have said this, I do hope that live streaming becomes more a part of the live music experience. Like, I know that they weren't easy to do for a lot of artists. Hopefully that will just be something that can be done by the venue, or done by people who just do that exclusively professionally, just for accessibility reasons, like just to make it possible for people with disabilities to enjoy your music in a live way without having to go to an inaccessible music venue.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many reasons why that would be good for people. But when we did my last band, Hoax Hunters, recorded a record called Clickbait, and I thought it'd be really funny if we did a virtual performance to release the record, because we were trying to be just forward thinking different. This was like 2015, 2016, and we had done all these things to try to figure it out. We were going to be basically in a home studio with everything mic'd up, and we've done some tests and all things, but I couldn't get anybody interested in watching it. They're like, oh, live band on the internet, that's crazy. I was like, no, this is going to be the future. I don't know when, but we're going to, like, if I can do it in my own home and I'm excited about it, I'm not the only one. Like, there's no way that this isn't going to be a thing. People are doing it. It's just we're a punk band or whatever, and that's weird to you or something. Like, I don't understand. So we almost did it, but I kind of wish we did, because we were like 3 or 4 or 5 years ahead of what people are doing now. But it's interesting to think about what the kind of things we were trying to do right ahead of what people actually had to do, But I hope that, I think you have a good point. It's like people who can't go to shows for various reasons. This is a great way, and especially extra income for bands and venues. Right. It's an easy thing to do. You can charge $5-10 to see it. Yeah. Or maybe just part of the show, the first hour or whatever, or only the headliner or whatever.
I mean, it'd be really cool too, just to even be like, even if you physically went to the show and you were there, you also can have access to the digital, the filmed version of it. So everybody gets a little bit of a kick out of watching a video of a show they were at. And like, oh, look, there I am. There's my head bobbing around. Like that kind of thing is always fun to see. And then like it helps you like capture that moment more and like keep it in your head, because a lot of times you go to a show and like it's all in your head memory. So like you better remember that that you went. And if you've gone to so many shows over years, you're gonna forget. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot I saw that band play live. Like, at least this way you could have access to it. It has its applications. Dylan, that's your industry. You need to start working on in LA.
Yeah, get on it.
Got to learn how to. That's a lot of technology to learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think more of that kind of, it's the pivot to video, but I mean, I think we need more of that, because I think we need for documentation reasons, for for posterity, to be able to have old footage that you can go access from, and see what those shows were like and what those bands were like. It makes it possible to watch a band that is really small and can't do a national tour and just plays the East Coast. Like, maybe one of those gets live streamed and then everyone else in the country can watch them, and you might find out you have a lot of fans and a place that's worth scheduling a tour to, you know?
Yeah, and in the context of this podcast and what we're talking about too, it's like we're just talking about bands. I mean, pop and R&B and hip hop and other types of genres are already doing this. So it's like bands just are like so stubborn, and it's so annoying that we're guitar, bass, and drums. We're going to do it this way. It's like why though? Like because it's fun, of course, but there's other ways of engaging people and doing things that are fun and I love playing in front of a live crowd. There's nothing better, but maybe I can't do it as much, or maybe I can't tour, or maybe I can't. And that's why I explored it with Clickbait, was how can we tour without touring? One of my favorite big bands is Foo Fighters. Shit on them or not. For some people like them and some people don't, but they've for years have done like free online concerts, to promote their shows, but also just like, sort of making it available and making themselves, accessible to more people, and they've done a really good job of putting on free online shows before the pandemic, the last 5-10 years, you can say it's promotion or whatever it is, but like, it's still like I got to see them play at my home. I can't always go to a concert, or they're not touring through or whatever. It's cool to see them, and it's often free. Sponsored by Budweiser or something, but it's free. You sit through the Verizon ad or something, but it's still
everything else you watch has a commercial in front of it.
Right. Exactly.
You pay a subscription to Hulu and you still have to watch commercials.
Right. I'm paying for the honor of watching a Verizon commercial. But they're one of the bigger bands that have done that, and I don't think there's a lot of other ones that have done it as much as they have and made it accessible as they have. There could be, but I haven't seen it as much. They're also one of the bigger bands, but you don't see Green Day or U2 or other large bands, Rolling Stones or whoever the biggest bands are. I don't see those type of bands doing this as much or at all if there's not a charge for it.
Yeah. I love this conversation we've had going, but I guess we should probably actually talk about get into format. So, the basic premise of our show is we assign our guests a year, and they choose an album from that year for us to talk about. Today, we gave you the year 1989.
I know things are getting tougher when you can't get the thought off the bottom of the barrel. Wide open, roar my future now. Looking fucking new.
Before we get into the record you chose, let's talk about a couple other albums that came out that same year. Are there any that you were... I know we talked a little bit early on when we were scheduling this episode. You had a couple records you wanted to talk about. So what were some of those records that you almost chose for us to talk about?
Yeah, I didn't want to pick something that was super obvious, like people already know or they talk about a lot. Like Nirvana Bleach. Great record, came out in 89. Like Soundgarden, those kind of things were all starting up and coming out. Fugazi has, I guess it's an album. It's kind of an album, I guess. It's
Margin Walker, right?
Yeah. So, again, there's enough podcasts and conversations about these bands. These topics. So, and other 89 records that came out that I thought would be really cool to talk about, but maybe weren't. I don't know. They meet my definition of punk, but maybe aren't punk to some people. Like the B-52s Cosmic Thing, like that came out. Massive record, but like what a weird band to be a massive band, right? Neil Young, Freedom, Rockin' in the Free World, like that song alone ushered in what came after it, that, and it's just kind of a weird, like Neil Young foreseeing the future a little bit, but Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique, and a lot of the hip hop and stuff that was coming out at that moment, De La Soul, like the things that were like a lot of sample based records that came out that you can't do anymore. That to me is super punk rock. I think Public Enemy maybe had a record out like those that this is probably the last year of those kind of records where you could sample without the court cases and stuff happening,
Yeah.
But yeah, and then there's like sort of that alternative, like you were saying, alternative pop gothy thing that was going on, like The Cure and Nine Inch Nails' first record, and then there's like massive bands that are not punk rock at all, like Tesla and Whitesnake. That probably everyone's more familiar with. But the record I really wanted to pick, and maybe this to me is kind of punk rock, by my definition, is Prince Batman soundtrack. I'm not kidding. I got it on vinyl a while ago, and it's fucking weird. Like he basically writes the story himself and he plays several characters and songs, and then there's the Bat Dance song is kind of cheesy when you think about it, but then if you actually look at it and kind of study the lyrics and stuff, it's kind of weird and fucking like just pushes all these different weird boundaries before anybody else does it in a song for a movie. Like this is all very forward thinking, like who let this guy do this, right? Like it's just bizarre. It just doesn't seem as bizarre now, but to me, like this is like he's playing like turntables in that song, but it's just like whoosh, whoosh. That weird sound is a turntable. It's not like scratching. He's like slowly moving the record around to make noises and stuff. It's bizarre. Like that record is bizarre and not aesthetically punk rock, but to me, like pushes back on everything. And he like, how dare him rewrite the story of the movie he's putting a soundtrack on for? Like he just does it. Like, and they let him do it.
Yeah, that record, he had like free reign to do whatever he wanted. I mean, and then they also turned around, or at least the composition, the Danny Elfman composition too. So like for those purists, I guess they can listen to that. But if you want like a truly unique experience,
it is weird. It has nothing to do with the movie,
right?
But yeah, he wrote a whole record based on his idea of what Batman would be, or the movie Batman. Anyway, that kind of thing was interesting to me, and maybe some of those are punk rock and some of them aren't, but to me those kind of made sense in my definition of like what punk is, but yeah, we ultimately went with the Lookouts.
Yeah, before we dive too much into that though, I guess I usually like to ask Dylan, if you were the guest on the show, what records would you pick for us to talk about?
I don't know. It's such a weird year. Like we kind of touched on, I mean, some of what you talked about is like clearly not punk and wouldn't fall under the punk umbrella, but what does fall under the punk umbrella is also not really punk.
Yeah.
I mean, grindcore.
Morbid Angel's first record.
Thrash.
Faith No More. It's like this rap metal hybrid with punk.
Yeah.
It's funny.
You've got some ska punk, even. You've got Youth Crew. You've got. I mean, there's as far as what's actually punk. There's weird records by big names like Brain Drain by Ramones.
Yeah. Which I listened to this week, and like it has a lot of big songs on it. Like it's probably like the last record with the most recognizable songs. Also,
Slint has their first record, Tweez, which I thought would be cool and definitely influential, but and to me is punk, but sound of it is probably more metal or like post rock or something. It's pretty metallic-y sounding.
Yeah, I think what happened with like a lot of the punk bands, they all, for the most part, like if you look at this list, we're looking at our usual Rate Your Music list. Who's the most like punk rock band that's still on this list? It's Bad Religion, right?
Bad Religion, yeah.
Like everything else is like morphing into more like noisy stuff or like.
Yeah, and it's like 10 years out from American hardcore bands starting up, and it's like 10 to 12 years after punk. started ish, like if you want to call it 77 or whatever, UK stuff, whatever. So you're kind of a decade out from that, which means, and there's been so many things going on with innovation, drum machines and keyboards becoming more popular, and technology, like recording is, becoming digital, but there's still that huge underground of weird music going on where people aren't really talking to each other, and so each region has its own weird stuff going on. So you're seeing the tail end of that stuff happening before the explosion in the 90s, of course. But there's not even a lot of grunge. I mean, there's that Soundgarden record and Nirvana, but those are still small bands at that point, or like they're club bands or whatever. They're not like hitting the radio or whatever yet.
Yeah, there's like some early Lemonheads, and even like kind of some early sort of shoegaze stuff.
It hadn't quite taken off yet.
You want to call Band of Susans shoegaze? Maybe not. I don't know.
Sugar Cubes. Did you say that?
No, that Sugar Cubes record is very strange.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it's just like the Cows had a record that's pretty noisy punk rock stuff.
Yeah.
Dead Moon. I don't know if I'm not super into Dead Moon. I know a lot of people are.
Yeah, a lot of people love Dead Moon though, which that's probably only this high up on the list because of retroactive like interest in that. Yeah, exactly. But go ahead.
The only really, I feel like the only really focused thing that's happening in punk rock in '89, I want to call, and I've had this conversation on Twitter, and I wanted to ask you this because I'm wondering if you're aware of it, or if you've come across it or read it or heard it. When do you think the term post-hardcore was really coined? Because I want to say '89 is like the true year one of post-hardcore, because you've got Rollins, you've got Slint, you've got Bitch Magnet, you've got a little bit of late Revolution Summer stuff still kind of going on, and you've got the first, like, you've got Margin Walker, you've got, the first Fugazi stuff.
I think it goes back to that 87 comment where it's like that's really the pivotal switch, like there's the word emo is being floated around and things like that, but it means post-hardcore really.
Yeah.
It doesn't really mean what you think of emo in the early 2000s or whatever, or even the 90s or whatever.
Was the term emo coined before post-hardcore? I feel like somebody probably said post-hardcore, referring to probably Embrace or Rites of Spring, but
I feel like everyone just calls themselves post-hardcore at some point, and it's just it's so silly. It's like hardcore obviously means like American, like really fast and like Minor Threat and that kind of stuff. But then if you, with that kind of definition in mind, are like Black Flag really hardcore? Especially later. Are they just a punk band? Like what does it all fucking mean anyway? So. Like shoegaze, it kind of makes more sense. Like there's another genre of this other stuff or whatever. But then you have a band like The Cure that can fit into any of these things. Maybe not hardcore, but like they could be emo, they could be goth, they could be alternative, they could be shoegaze on some songs. They could be. I mean, they're just so. It's really, I don't know. Defining things is really tricky. I don't know when post-hardcore, maybe between 87 and 89 makes sense that those kind of terms started popping up, because there's just so much going on, and it wasn't new wave, it wasn't pop. Like when does pop punk start? Like the same thing. Right. It's like around the same time people started defining these things. Probably power pop was probably a word by then, but that was more like AM radio stuff, but with like distortion, or like REM or something. Maybe it would be power pop at some point. I don't know. So I don't know. I get kind of annoyed with these terms sometimes, because it's just like people get so angry about it. And it's like, who cares? Like,
right.
like maybe this band has a lot of different things, and it's to me like I said, Prince Batman to me is punk. But if I said that, I'd probably get beaten up on Twitter about it. But at the same time, I don't fucking care, because it meets my definition, my aesthetic definition of what that means to me. And I don't know, that word post-hardcore, I don't know. Like, what were Fugazi called when they first started? hardcore.
Probably emo. I think they were still calling them emo.
Yeah.
Because that's why you'll occasionally hear people call Fugazi emo core. Like early
Yeah, or
Fugazi.
emo core, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they started putting core behind everything.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that on the basis that it's Ian Mackay and Guy Picciotto from Embrace and Rites of Spring doing a band together. So, but yeah,
Right.
I mean,
And then if you're on the West Coast and you're trying to describe a band coming for the first time, you're going to put emo or something on there because you're like, well, Embrace and Rites of Spring. Okay, well, these guys, okay, it's probably this. And you're just guessing.
yeah.
You know, this kind of brings up an interesting point because Kariki just started up, right? The band that has Joe and Ian and Amy, which is basically somewhere in between the Evens and Fugazi. But they made a big point about not really posting a bunch of music online and like not putting the record out yet and like doing. This is the last band I saw before the pandemic, actually, but they wanted you to come see the show first and then tell people what you thought of it. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's like, well, what does it sound like? Well, you're just going to read about it in a magazine or a zine or whatever, and you don't get to hear it unless you go buy the record when it finally shows up at your local store. So you're going to describe it as post-hardcore or emo or something based on the people in the band that you know or in other bands that you're familiar with. So it makes sense that these terms would come around in this part of the 80s because there's a lot of different changes happening and bands members that are switching, up where they're going, like Rollins is another good example. Like he's touring around the Rollins band. Well, the early Rollins band is kind of funky or metal or something, or like, but it's still basically Black Flag vocals on top of it,
Yeah.
So what is that? I don't know. He was, post-hardcore, I guess.
Kind of. Yeah.
It's slower and still aggressive. It's not metal, but is it? They're not playing like crazy finger tap solos or something on it. They're not a thrash band for sure, but I don't know. The subgenres thing is just really weird.
I'm endlessly fascinated with subgenre stuff. I like talking subgenre just because I just get a kick out of talking.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'm the first person who was always like, it's punk. Like I'm definitely always like, it's just a punk band. Like, and it's like, what kind? I mean, I like talking about that, but like, I call like so many indie rock bands punk all the time, and people are like, oh, that's an indie rock record. It's like,
well, then you go to the record store, everything's under rock. Like everything ever is under rock, and then unless they're their skin complexion's a little different and they're in a rock band and they're in the R&B section or something. It's like, what the fuck? Like that's a rock band, and that's definitely not a rock band. But like the record store is just weird. And then you go to another record store and it's like 50 different subgenres. Like, well, where the fuck do I find Fugazi? Is it under indie rock because that's where you put it, or punk, or like post-hardcore, or like like underground music, or alternative, or like what? Like I don't know. Like I remember in the 90s, I didn't know anything about music yet, and I don't have an older sibling or family that lived closer with cousins that were older, so I was kind of discovering things as I would discover them. And you would go to the record store at the mall, and it would just have an alternative record end cap, and so I would just go to the thing that said alternative because I knew that to me meant the bands that I kind of liked hearing. I didn't know what these bands sounded like, and they were all vastly different sometimes. And I would just pick out a record based on the cover because you couldn't really listen to it. And I got the first Weezer record, I think, because those guys looked kind of cool. Like, oh, I kind of look like those dorks on the cover. That's going to be kind of fun, right? The Blue record, where they're just wearing like, garage, shirts and shit like that. And that's like, well, that's what we felt like and dressed like, so I'll pick that record up, and like the Offspring record or whatever. It's like, this is going to be kind of cool. But but that title kind of helped you out at that point before they got too big.
I was gonna say, alternative is a nice umbrella term because it kind of does just kind of give you like, well, I mean, it could be indie rock, it could be goth rock, it could be punk. They all fall under the greater alternative umbrella because it's meant to be an alternative from. It used to be meant to be an alternative from top 40 rock music, which was not the same thing. Now, since the 90s, top 40 rock music became alternative music, and then after that, I don't even know what top 40 rock music is.
Now they're just indie rock. Like, Arcade Fire is indie rock. I'm like, well, are they though? Like, I mean the sound, I guess, but like not really even the sound anymore. But it's certainly not what it means to me. It's so bizarre, but like okay, well, I get it. Like if you like that music, you're gonna like Arcade Fire. That makes sense. Just like alternative, like, well, Offspring is a punk band, and Weezer is like a power pop band produced by the Cars, Rick Ocasek. It's like those are vastly different bands, in the same category next to each other. Like, okay, it doesn't help you at all if you don't know what those things sound like in 1993 or whatever it is, and you're just picking up records off the shelf. You have no idea. So
yeah, people definitely have it much easier today in the sense that you can listen to a whole record now before you buy it if you're even into buying. Yeah, if you're a physical medium person. Yeah, there's definitely that whole like, well, I bought the CD and I didn't like most of it, but I'm gonna force myself to listen to it until I like it.
That is definitely a lost something that, like, I don't want to be like, old man, it was better then, because it wasn't. I mean, I definitely had plenty of CDs where I'm just like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I'm stuck with it. But I do think that it's very easy for people to sample like 20 seconds of something. And I'm saying this as someone who does this. Like, you can listen to like 20, 30 seconds of something and go, move on. And you just you don't give it any time to become familiar. Like my wife listens to a lot of the same songs, and I kind of poke fun at her for doing that. Like, kind of just like, this is the 40 songs that I'm listening to for a while. But she's also said, like, I don't like things the first time I hear them. Like, I don't like something the first time I hear it. I need some familiarity. Like, so that's why she like gravitates towards artists that she already knows she likes. Like, there's something about them that she consistently enjoys, so she listens to that artist a lot. So I do think that people have, by and large, have forgotten how to sit with something that doesn't immediately satisfy their cravings and acquire a taste for it.
Yeah, and it's easy to say, well, it's because there's so much available and it's so easy, but that's not really why. Like, it's like it's a habit. It's a thing that you need to define and set time to do, or we just need to change how we do it. Having more things doesn't mean we have to do it the same. Like, it doesn't mean you have to listen to more of it or less of it. It just means you have more things, Like, as you get older, you have a whole house full of books and records. Do you listen to all those things all the time? No. Well, you get around to them, or maybe you never listen to them, or maybe listen to or watch things a lot of times, Yeah, it's just kind of weird, but yeah, I don't know, subgenres.
Yeah, I think we've talked definitely a lot about a lot of different things, and we've not quite really got to our record yet. So we're like almost an hour in, and we haven't touched the record. So we gave you 1989. You selected The Lookouts' Spy Rock Road. I got a couple stats on the album. So the Lookouts were from Iron Peak, California, middle of nowhere, California. They formed in 1985. This is their second and final full-length studio album. They do have a full-length demo, supposedly, but this was released on Lookout Records, and the personnel on this album is Larry Livermore on guitar and vocals, Kane Kong on bass and backing vocals, and Trey Cool on drums and lead vocals on a couple tracks. The album was produced by Kevin Army and the band as well. And some additional musicians, Lint, a.k.a. Tim Armstrong of Rancid, plays guitar on Living Behind Bars and Sonny Boy. And Kevin Army plays acoustic guitar on The Green Hills of England and Red Sea. And that'll be all I say for now. First thing I like to ask our guests is, what made you choose this album specifically to talk about?
Yeah, so we kind of went over what was out there, and I just thought picking something that maybe a lot of people haven't listened to before, but maybe have some familiarity with, might be kind of fun. It's a pretty good record. It's not my favorite record. I've had a copy of it for years. But what I like about it is it kind of is a really good example of what was going on in that scene that's not super big. So like, from that scene you have Green Day and, Op Ivy, which came out this year as well. Bigger bands bands that became cult famous, or bigger bands from that scene. But this record kind of sounds like maybe most of the other bands, maybe a good example of what everything else kind of sound like. And I just rewatched yesterday, there's a documentary on the East Bay punk scene called Turn It Around, and you should definitely check it. I liked it the second time I watched it more than the first time, actually. And maybe my opinions changed just based on last year and things, thinking about things and whatever. But the Lookouts, Larry was influenced by the things that were going on. He's a little bit older at that time. He's like in his 30s. He's looking around at, post-Vietnam San Francisco area, and like hippies and rednecks and things are going on, that kind of thing. And punk's kind of starting up. And, San Francisco is a pretty, feral ground for lots of different culture things, not just the, late 60s, but, comedy and LGBTQ, and like lots of cool things have happened in this town. So punk kind of almost got pushed out to Oakland and Berkeley because there wasn't any room left in the city. Like they just weren't booking as much of it, or bands were having a hard time, or there was more violence in the city when they went to go play. So these bands end up going out that way. And then these people from out in the country where Larry lived, he started seeing these bands. But I think what they ultimately do is, this is like the second generation punk out that way. So you had Dead Kennedys and things like that already. And this is a few years after this scene. But Maximum Rock and Roll, kind of those people started a venue called 924 Gilman Project, because they wanted a positive place to play where there was no violence and there was no, all these things, no drinking, that kind of thing. So I just thought it'd be cool to talk about that, because it's just this fun like scene where they really try to do positive things and a lot of the bands have, openly, gay members and members of different races and women and like just like, and it's, just a cool little scene, and most of it's pretty positive and pretty poppy, and various versions of that for each band. But the Lookouts kind of think, Larry ends up starting Lookout Records, to put out these bands. But I don't know. It's the story of that scene is kind of wrapped up in this record a little bit before it kind of disintegrates and things kind of fade off as they do after 5 or 10 years.
Sure. What I like to usually say is like kind of like my opinions or takes on the bands prior to like listening to the album for the show. But honestly, I didn't have much of an opinion on the Lookouts before. Yeah,
I don't think a lot of people do. That's kind of the reason why I wanted to pick it. It's like, oh yeah, sure, that Lookouts, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Most people don't. I don't think I knew before that Lookout Records was started the name comes from this band.
Yeah. It's like the guy who starts the label named after his own band.
Yeah.
But the cool, like, he finds Trey, ends up being in Green Day because he's his neighbor.
Yeah.
And like this, he's 12 years old and he's just going wild in the backyard. And he's like, that kid might be like, maybe he can play drums. And he brings him over to his house and teaches him how to play drums as a 12-year-old. Never played drums before. So he's responsible for bringing this guy into the world, basically. And the bass player, he had never played bass. So he's got 2 preteens in his band, and he's like 30 something, which is kind of weird. But good thing he's a wholesome dude, I guess. And it seemed like he was the dad for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But he really looked out for these kids and these other bands, and took care of people and helped foster all these things that happened.
So yeah, that was definitely my like initial. I was like, huh, okay, this band. Oh, okay, Larry Livermore's in this. Oh, this is where Trey Cool came from. And then I was reading more into it. I was like, he was 12? And the other guy was 14? And Larry was in his 30s when they started? And I was just like, oh, but they also lived in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah. He was neighbors with the kid, and he was just like, well, come play drums? It makes more sense when you do have that context of like where they lived and like super rural, mountainous.
His dad. One of the things I thought was really cool about Green Day when I first got into him as a teenager was that Trey Cool's dad drove the bookmobile that they toured in. They had an old bookmobile they toured in. It was like promos on MTV or something. Oh, they're this big band. Like, no, they're in this like shitty, like, it looks like a food truck. It says bookmobile on the side, and the drummer's dad's driving it. He's like an old truck driver. And so in the documentary, he's talking about, he's like, yeah, on this side of the mountain or the hill, wherever, is all the hippies, and on that side is all the rednecks, and that's Larry the Punker. And so like Larry the Punker is kind of like this guy that just like sees the good in people. Is he a hippie? Not really, but he's definitely not a redneck. So he's kind of that in between. Like, I think why I think Trey's dad was like, yeah, this seems like it's going to be okay. Yeah. And lets his kid run off with this guy and play shows and things. I think he understands like this guy's got good intentions, and it's kind of a cool thing to see that. It's maybe even very, not to bring this up again, but very very similar to a lot of other people that ran off and joined bands like Dave Grohl. Like his mom's like, you're going to be fine. Like this, like it makes sense that you understand their kid when they go to do this thing with a weirder, thing, like an old man band or something, or anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely an odd dynamic that, you need that full context with. And plus Larry Livermore's reputation going forward, he's known for just being like a really nice like person and like responsible for helping a lot of bands get their start. Like, it's so funny because I was looking at the Lookout Records discography, and like I always associated them with like the bubblegum pop punk, like the Ramones core bands, like those things. And then I forget too that they also put out stuff by like Avail, like
like later in after Larry gets rid of it to the guy that does all the artwork or something, they start putting out bands that are not from there, like Avail and Engine Down from Richmond was like one of the last bands. Ted Leo, like near the end.
American Steel was on there. Bratmobile was even on
Bratmobile, yeah. It just, definitely didn't make any sense, as far as sonically or regionally or anything like that.
Yeah, but even still, like even that's after the point where he sold the label to that other guy, like it's still part of the history of that label. So it's really cool that it has like diverging paths, but
yeah.
Live in a bad part of town, and when I go to see them, it always brings me down. Bars across the window, iron gates across the door, and the whole neighborhood looks like the middle of a war. We can fall from the back in the dead of the night. Windows rolled up and the doors locked tight. Creep up the alley, trying not to make a sound. I was looking around, boy, it might be coming down. We haven't got a nickel, no, we haven't got a dime. Can't even get away because we haven't got the time. The clerks stand full through some bureaucratic fuss, and never lies find a way into plastic box. I don't know why it is that people have to live like this. Gotta get out before it's too late. We gotta get out whatever it takes, because we're living behind bars and we got no choice. Living behind bars and we got no voice. Living behind bars and we got to get away. On the other side of town there's a great big wall where the rich man lives.
Listening to this record, I actually kind of talked a little bit too. We were just kind of like, we'd each listened to the album, and both of us, you said this a little earlier, that you think it's just like, you think it's a pretty good album, but it's not like your favorite. And so like we were both kind of wondering like, what is it about this specific record that makes it so something that you so desperately want to talk about? And now knowing like the fuller picture of like the who it is, what it is, the fact that there's are teens on this record, like
I mean, you can hear like Trey's a fucking good drummer at like not having ever played before, and this is his, like, he's only a few years into playing drums at this point on the second recording. Wow. Like, yeah, it gets off here and there. There's some like flubs or like whatnot, but it's like light years better than what I was doing at that age. Like, you know what I mean? Or anybody I know. Like, wow, you can hear the talent, and that these guys are pushing each other and trying to do different things, but also like how weird the guitar stuff is on songs like Alienation, where he's just like, I'm gonna do this weird guitar pedal and like chord thing, and like they just did lots of weird things because like who cared? Like you know, they just like, this song's about alienation. Let's make it sound like it's that, you know. And then if you go look at some of the other stuff, like the other bands that were doing things at the same time in that scene, they were also doing kind of weirder things. So we think of the Mr. T Experience, and we think of Pansy Division and Green Day and things like that, because that's kind of the overarching bands that, you know, everybody can get into. But Isocracy and this band and Blatz, which is one of my favorite bands from that scene, they're just kind of weird. They're just doing weird things, you know, because they're just entertaining each other, you know, and writing songs and trying to be cool with each other and having parties and stuff. I think my two favorite songs, though, are the ones that Trey sings.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
My favorite songs were the ones that Trey sings and Tim plays guitar on. Like those were like
Yeah.
the ones that I was like, well, I like that best. That would be that Girls from Outer Space
And Sonny Boy.
Sonny
And
Boy
Living Behind the Bar is pretty good too.
That's the one with, I think Tim's on guitar on that one.
Yeah.
Because he's not on the same songs. He's like on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then.
And the cool thing also about the record, which is another reason why I wanted to pick it, is because it's the same guy who does all the artwork for the first, you know, amount of releases, and they only had like one color, you know, print. So it's got that. Oh, you can't see it. It's green screen. Well, it's green. It's like the first green. It's like Kerplunk, and it's like 1039. All those and Op IV, you know, like all that like cool artwork. But on the back, there's like these comics and stuff that look like a lot of that stuff. It's the same artist. So as far as like aesthetically, it just feels really fun and cool, and like definitely you can see what's about to happen by looking at this record and listening to it. It's like, oh my god. And I think the other thing about this is that these guys were playing before Gilman Street. They helped build it and open it up, and they were playing shows before that. So that's kind of cool, right? They were around before that. But Green Day, who were farther, well, they're called Sweet Children at the time. They were farther away from this area, like farther out into another area of California, and they kept trying to play Gilman, and they were like, "Nah, you're too poppy. You can't play here." Like, so no one ever heard them. So like the Lookouts were playing, and you know, Mr. T Experience and Neurosis and bands like that were playing Gilman, right? And they never let Sweet Children or Green Day whatever play, which was bizarre. And so Gilman actually closes in '88 after 2 years, because the people who run Maximum Rock and Roll are like not having it. People are just going crazy over there, and like there's been some skinhead violence and stuff. So they eventually reopen Gilman, and Green Day gets to play with Op Ivy, and everyone's like, holy shit, who are these guys? And then that's where all the stuff really picks back up, because everyone just thought this band was a joke or a pop band or whatever, and then they play, and everyone from Neurosis to everyone was just like turned, their heads just turned like, who are these fucking kids? You know. And then eventually they go on tour, and around '89 is when all this stuff's going on. But the Lookouts are you know, they're starting Lookout Records, and there's just a lot packed into this 1 year for this particular scene before it explodes.
Yeah, I pulled up Lookouts releases specifically from 1989, and like here's a couple of things that were released that year. Operation Ivy released Energy, which is a gigantic record. Green Day released the 1000 Hours EP.
They did 10 7-inches, I think.
Is that it?
They were trying to do 10 7-inches, I think, that year, or that period of time.
That makes sense, because then they do Crimp Shrines, Quit Talking Claude EP, Mr. T Experience, So Long Sucker 7-inch, which I think some of those songs would wind up on the next LP. There's a Neurosis EP, Aberration, and then there's a couple other bands like I didn't really know very well, but like those were like the big ones. And so yeah, it's like this very fertile ground for what was about to really blow up in the 90s with all of those bands.
And it's all the same people, and it's the same people making the artwork and the same people doing the door, and it's just I don't know, it's just kind of cool. And I thought that to me, like this record kind of sums that up. If you don't know the other stuff that's going on, check out this record first. Get an idea of the positive vibes and like the weird different songs. Like to me, it doesn't sound like an album almost. It sounds like a collection of different types of ideas.
Yeah, it was recorded in like 3 different studios too.
Yeah.
So like that probably lends towards like the like cut and paste sort of feel of this record. So I know we try and judge things in context for the scene and time, but then also at the same time, if you take the record purely as just this is the record, like you put it in the narrow lanes of like we put in a vacuum of like this is the record. Listening to it, what do you feel? Like since you chose it, like listening to it, how do you feel about it?
Listening to it, it's a fun record. I like we pointed out the better tracks. I would probably DJ a few of those Trey singing songs, not because it's Trey, just because of those songs kind of stand out as like good fun songs. Overall, it's fine. Like it's not like I said, it's not an amazing record. I think it just tells a better story than it is a better record.
Okay. I was kind of worried that whenever like we got to this portion of the show that you would be mad at my opinion.
No. Like everyone's entitled to it.
So ultimately, I probably didn't like it all that much. It's just very rough and all over the place, really.
Yeah.
Like this is one of those records where I would just be like, yeah, I'm probably not going to listen to this again in the future. But that being said, there are probably like 4 or 5 tracks on here that I'm like, okay, I do really like that song a lot. Like I really liked The Green Hills of England, which is
that's
like
a kind of cool song too.
It's like a very different sounding song for the record because it's got a lot of acoustic in there. It feels like a British folk song almost. I guess with the title, he's probably going for that vibe,
right?
Ultimately, but then there's songs on here that like I just do not like.
Yeah,
like
there's a couple of weird things on here that was like, okay.
I was not a fan of Alienation. I was not a fan of Trees. Like a lot of these songs just like they go on way too long.
Yeah, because they'll have a couple of like fast punk songs and then they'll have like a 5-minute song called Trees. And and Alienation's also almost 5 minutes. But you can hear like just like I think Trey's dad pointed out, like they're stuck in this like on this hill there's like old hippies and then on this other hill there's these rednecks and like there's the atmosphere of like what's going on. Reagan was the governor and then he's about to be he's president now. And so like they have a better understanding of what's going on in the country maybe because of that. And like I don't know, just like so the songs kind of are like more like almost like a throwback to the hippie pre-punk culture. Maybe he's got those songs laying around or those ideas laying around before he discovered punk and started being in the Lookouts. So it's kind of a weird like throwback or something. But yeah, are they great songs? Not really. but I think that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up and to talk about it, because it's so easy to go back and listen to Fugazi or Op Ivy or all those other great records because they're so good, and we listen to them, we talk about them all the time because we should.
think of it? 'Cause I know a little bit of what you told me, but we try and keep our like opinions on the records like secret before the recording. But there are some times where we're both
I'm usually the one who's like, this isn't good. Or like, oh fuck, what am I gonna say about this? I mean, my opinion ultimately is that it's not very enjoyable to listen to, but it is very worth. I'm glad that I listened to it for all of the reasons that we talked about. Like, it's where does it fit in the context of punk in 1989? I mean, just looking at what falls under the punk umbrella in '89 that we talked about earlier, it's like this is more purely punk if you want to have like a really strict definition of that genre than most of the bands that were making music at that time. And Lookout Records is very much responsible for kind of, I mean, defining pop punk for the 90s, I think. Like California in general. I mean, SoCal definitely, you know, the skate punk scene has a lot to do with that too. But those two things aren't, you know, they're not islands. Like they're very much connected in a lot of ways. You know, I'm sure that East Bay punk bands were listening to SoCal punk bands. Like they were playing together. So there's a lot of that cross pollination there, and it's from those two scenes that very defined pop punk sound comes from, and where that idea of what punk is sonically, more so than any other period of time in punk rock. Like, I feel like it's more unified going from this point on.
Yep. Yeah.
Than it was prior, because you look at, I mean, 77, the UK punk thing is pretty consistent. But you look at the 76, 77 American counterparts, and it's not at all.
Right. Yeah, and I think that it's the regional thing too. It's like the stuff in the LA scene kind of sounds similar, and then this stuff kind of sounds similar, and the stuff in New York and the stuff in DC. But as people start hearing these other things, now we're 10 years out, and this scene pops out and just kind of isolates itself and kind of redefines what you're saying. I mean, Jawbreaker comes out of this after that.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of crazy that late, 10, 12 years later, that there's still this thing popping up and has such a big effect. I mean, I guess you could say that about Seattle too, where it happened at the same time with grunge and things like that. So those two scenes are definitely gonna, make their imprint on the 90s right here. This, maybe, I don't know, what would be the Seattle grunge equivalent of this band? Like, what's the pre Green Rivers? Is that the band I'm thinking of? That kind of thing?
Oh yeah, the one that like everybody talks about as like they're like the Dead Moon of like the the Seattle.
Yeah, it's
scene.
like, you got to check out this record. Like, cool, I did. Now all these other bands came out of it and influenced all these other things, and they kind of set the mark. And I think that's what these bands. There was nobody who quite set the mark here. I think they all were doing their own thing, and they were very encouraging of each other to do their own thing, which I thought was unique about this particular scene, because there are a lot of similarities, especially that Op Ivy guitar sound is basically Billy Joe's guitar sound. It's the same almost guitar amp pedal combination sound for some reason, before he takes it in a different direction, but there's not a lot of other similarities. There's a really gruff, voice over here. There's a really poppy, squeaky voice over here. These people are singing about this thing. These people are singing about that thing. Whereas in Seattle, it seemed a lot more of the same thing, a little bit more of a cohesion thing going on between them. There was a split, I guess. We're getting off, but before Nirvana came along, it was more similar type of things, I guess, going on.
Yeah. Listening to this record, though, it kind of reminded me of not that long ago, Dylan and I talked about the Flex Your Head comp from Discord Records.
Yeah.
And it has very much of similar vibe in the sense that I feel like this record is more important from a historical perspective than so much of like just a purely enjoyability factor. And that comp felt the same way to me, because that comp was also full of teenagers playing 3 songs. It was like, if you just listen to those songs in a vacuum, you're like, most of these either sound the same or they're not very good.
Right.
There's a handful of people on here that are really, really good. But yeah, it had the same like
Yeah.
It's interesting and historically important, but I'm not necessarily going to throw it on to listen to.
One thing I did in the pandemic early on too was I went through the catalog of Discord and Teen Beat and things like that and started putting a playlist together. And I tried to put a song or two songs or whatever from each release. And I'm a big Discord fan, but I found that like, man, there's some real highlights in that catalog, of course. But then a lot of the other stuff I just don't like that much. It's fine. The stuff I like in that catalog is some of my all-time favorites, and I always go back to. But there's some clearly talented people, and then there's some just average people in there, which is totally fine. And it's exactly what's going on in this. You're exactly correct. It's like that's what's going on in this scene too. And this record falls in that, I think, probably in between. It's like it's not the worst band, it's not the best band by far, but a lot of merit, and there's a lot of reason to check out this stuff and understand what's going on and hearing that stuff in context. And this is exactly why I wanted to pick it.
Yeah, they're definitely further along than some of the other bands at this point. Like,
this he's like 40 at this point.
Well, yeah. But I mean, even in like their career as a band, like they've already done a full length before this record even came out.
Yeah. Like
I was looking at it, like, he Trey was 16. If we're going based just on like between 85 and 89, so if you add the years, he was 16. Kong was 18.
Right.
But then even Larry was like in his 40s at this point.
Right.
Like, when this record came out.
Right. I'm just trying to think about it. I'm like, if I were to put two teenagers on stage with me right now, that'd be weird.
It kind of reminded me, like, I was talking to a friend, our friend Corey, who's been on the show a bunch of times. I was talking to him a few weeks ago about like the Lindas when they got signed to Fat Records. And then like I was telling him, I was like, oh, this is really cool they got signed. And he's like, yeah, I think they sound bad. I was like, but I also think all teenager bands are supposed to sound bad.
Right.
Because
like that's the first thing they've ever done.
They're children still.
I mean, it's still pretty incredible what they are doing. And they obviously have a good system of parents and teachers that are helping them along the way there. Who cares? Like some people are like, oh, look at those adults. I'm like, who the fuck cares? That was awesome.
Yeah. I'm stoked for that record whenever it comes out. And I'm sure when I'm listening to it, I'm going to be like, yeah, that's written by children. I mean, it's cool.
Right. And not everything's for us either, too. It's like, do I need to hear that record? Not really. Like, I know what they're doing. This is great. But there's a whole lot of people who need to hear this record.
Yeah,
a whole lot of people. And that's going to speak to those people, hopefully, and especially kids and young women and other people that need to hear this music for the first time ever. That's great. Like, they don't always need to go back to Bikini Kill or Fugazi or whatever. Like, we need new Bikini Kills, new Fugazis, new Beastie Boys, new whatever. Like, we need we don't always need to go back to the same people. Like, it's somebody else's turn. And that's what the Lindas are doing right now.
Right.
Maybe that's the end of their career. Maybe one of those people goes on to do something forever. I don't know. We don't know yet.
They don't know yet. They're still children. Right. They don't know yet.
Let them blow people's minds and turn some heads for a minute. That's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, I do very much get annoyed by people who are like there was a ton of discourse about the Olivia Rodrigo record when it came out. And a ton of people were like, it's just the same thing as we were listening to. It's like, yeah, but it's now. It's like
now, and it's also really good.
It's like for people now. Like, I get it. You can always go back and find something, but people want to be a part of it.
We're talking about things that are popping. And like, have you actually listened to Machine Gun Kelly? Have you had to experience that? Because it's like I think Travis Barker is playing drums on it. So, okay, now you're a pop punk band. I think it's the meme, like when he joins your band or whatever. But it sounds like he's like sixth wave Blink-182 or something, but then like also a SoundCloud rapper at the same time or something. It's, in my opinion, really bad. But then Olivia Rodrigo. I'm sorry. I actually liked that second single, Good For You. I thought that was like, maybe she didn't write it or she had help with it. I don't care. It's good. It's got elements of different things and it's speaking to the people listening to it now. And it's quality,
Yeah, I was definitely like I knew that Driver's License song before that record came out. But then people were talking about how it's like, oh, it's like, like early 2000s emo vibes to it. So I was like, what? So I gave it a listen, and that first song has some strong Paramore vibes to it, which is pretty cool.
Wait, somebody's got emotion?
Yeah. And then like the rest of the record, there's like a bunch of songs that are just more like that Driver's License song, and so I was like, it's not for me. But like, I like those real, like, there's like 2 really powerful rock songs on that album. So
yeah,
like you said, it's for now. The people who need to hear that are hearing it now.
Yeah.
So
and they don't need to hear, Jimmy Eat World Clarity or whatever.
Yeah. You can't be like the guy who's just like, they should be listening to Pinkerton. It's like, well,
what did you listen to before Pinkerton? Fucking asshole, right? It's like Pink Floyd or whatever your dad was into, Jimi Hendrix. Like, yeah, I like that stuff too. And then I got into stuff that was out when I was out. And then I got into stuff that was after that. And I'm still getting into stuff now.
Yeah.
Like, it's not always for me. It's not always for you. It's for whoever, go check it out. Go listen to something that's 100 years old. Go listen to something that came out yesterday. It's all cool. Go do it.
Yeah. Definitely doesn't have to be a months long discourse about it. It can just, it's pop record. It's pop record.
Like, a lot of people always have to hate on everything too. It's like, move on.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I'm not into it, so I'm not going to listen to it, and I'm not going to spend time talking about it. Like,
I try really hard not to be negative online about anything that's art, unless it crosses a weird line or something like that. Like like the Machine Gun Kelly thing. Like, I don't like them. Does anybody care about my opinion about Machine Gun Kelly? No. Moving on, right? But if I do like something, I try to champion it, even if it's something that people don't think that's cool, or that think I'm not cool for liking it, or I'm too old, or I'm a dude or something. Who the fuck cares? I think that Haim record is great. It's a pop record. It sounds like Sheryl Crow and other things. Whatever. I'm enjoying it. We just lived through a fucking pandemic and an insurrection. Fuck off. I need a pop record right now,
I definitely, in my earlier, like in my 20s and early teens or late teens, I was definitely more like I have to make my opinion known on this thing that I don't like. I have to let people know that I don't like Nickelback. It's like, you and a million other people don't like that band. But
of course you don't like Creed. Who cares?
Right. Like, you grow up, like, unless I'm like specifically reviewing it for review purposes, but I also don't, tend to publish that stuff just out on Main Street, like if I'm going to do an episode of this podcast and like say it's a record that I don't like, it's, at least it's not like you can just search their name and it'll show up, like in Twitter or like Facebook or something like that. Yeah. Or I'm not tagging the artist saying, hey, I don't like your record,
Yeah. I was thinking earlier today, like the days of Justin and I spending a whole episode shitting on a record are far in the past at this point. Mm-hmm. And I'll stand by whatever I said about whatever record we have gotten bad reviews for not liking.
Yeah.
Whatever. If if I'm prompted to talk about it, I'll talk about it and say what I feel, but I'm not like, I don't need to like sit here and tear apart this record made for fun.
Right.
By teenagers primarily.
Right. for their friends. Like they didn't think like that. I think you were reading the bio. I was reading it earlier. It's like he's recounting it just like last year, and he's like, oh, more people are hearing it now, and more people are buying it and listening to it. We're getting more money for it in 2020 than we ever did before, which again goes back to the point. It's like, well, people can check it out. It's easy to check it out, but it's like, things come back around, and maybe it's not for teenagers and that insular scene anymore. It's just for artistic archiving, reference point type of thing, which is kind of why I like it, but there's a lot of weird records I'll buy, like when I see them in the used bin, if they're from Virginia or something like that, and I've never heard of them, or like it seems like it's recorded at an adjacent studio to the things that I already know or something like that, I'll check it out. And almost all of them are pretty bad, that's why I haven't heard of them. But you never know, and it's just cool to check it out and be like, oh, this is what was going on in 1982. Okay, that's pretty weird. I bet they never thought I would hear it in 2020 on my record player in Richmond, Virginia, when they made it in Raleigh or something. Like you start thinking about it that way. It's like, well, where are these people now? Like maybe they're doing something cool, maybe they're not. Yeah,
I mean,
but
we've released music. Like Dylan and I were in a hardcore band, like not quite 10 years ago at this point, but like occasionally, I mean, I assume they're bots most of the time, but we get like weird likes on Facebook for it, and I'm like, do you really like this, or are you just like a click farm where you're just like you're required to like all this stuff? But even still, what if someone comes like, I never expected anybody to come across it. Like we had somebody in Russia write a review for it when we first put it out. I never expected that.
Check this shit out. Okay.
I noticed I looked it up, our EP up on Rate Your Music sometime last year, and I noticed that there's maybe like 3 ratings, and one of them is probably mine. But I noticed that someone had rated it in like 2019 or 2020. I was like, who found this?
Yeah.
Where did they find this?
Yeah.
And then they were like, 3 stars. I'm like, yeah, it's 3 stars. He's right. And he's right. But like, I'm just like, that's really cool that I made something that someone randomly found in probably the same way that I randomly find shit all the time. Because I do this. Like I dig through.
Yeah. It's like
stuff
internet digging through the crates. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had the same thing weird. So one of my friends' bands, you guys may not remember this band from the 90s from Richmond, 30 Day Warranty. And they were late 90s, early 2000s. Their first out of town show was with us in Lynchburg. Their parents drove them down in a minivan, dumped them out. Pre-teenagers or teenagers playing pop punk. And we became friends, and I went on tour with them several years later once we could all drive and things like that. And they were super into Green Day and the East Bay scene and all that stuff. So much that one of the members, after this band broke up, moved to be at this. He lives down there and goes to see these bands and plays in bands with these people and that kind of thing. So I know he's gonna be checking out this playlist, this podcast. So they were in a pop punk band that sounded like this stuff and also like a Vale and Richmond kind of things. I kind of took ownership of their catalog a little bit and kind of kept it alive on the internet and interest in it, whatever. And I posted some CDs that I had in my distro on Bandcamp when Bandcamp was kind of new. When they first did the merch thing, I was like, okay, I have all these extra CDs. I'll just put them on there and see what happens. And of course, no one's buying this old catalog of CDs that no one cares about in the first place. And then I get an order for the 30-day warranty package. I'm like, okay, cool. No problem. This is exciting. And then I look at closer. I'm like, Russia? Like somebody in Russia wants to buy this? Okay. So I wrote him, I'm like, hey, man, this is super cool. I'm definitely going to mail them to you. But like, I don't know, like, you need to tell me like if there's a way to get this to you that's going to get to you. I don't know, like Russia might kick it back or, like if you mail something to like China or things like that, sometimes it doesn't get through or whatever. But so I was asking him, and this person told me the story of he heard one of these songs on the radio, on internet radio somewhere, and that's how he got into pop punk. That 30-day warranty song changed his fucking life and got him to Green Day and Blink-182 and all. I don't know how he heard it on the internet, but he heard, and he's been years of searching to try to find that song again. And I was the one that put it back on the internet, and he bought the CDs. I'm like, what? So I was like, dude, and I've just made the biggest box of CDs. I gave him everything, like all my old bands, flyers, stickers, buttons, like anything that could fit into this box from that time period, and just shipped it off. I've never heard anything from him since.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is so cool, man. Like, I don't care that I'm losing money on this shipping and all this stuff. I'm like, you got to have this. Like, this changed your life. This one band song, you got to have all these things. And it was so cool. And that's what happens. Like somebody, gets into something randomly, and you don't know what it, he's got one fan in Russia. That's super cool.
We have a buddy who runs a record label too, Bitter Melody Records, and he regularly sends like packages to a record store in Japan of like whatever he's putting out. A lot of They love CDs there still.
Oh yeah, they're huge in the CDs.
So
I should send some stuff.
So like he's just sending like all these like they're semi-regional bands. They're not necessarily like the biggest bands. They're also the kind of bands who like they put out a record and they're probably going to break up. But like
Right.
you put it out because you like it and you want to take be a part of that story and hope maybe something else happens. But it might not. But like even those CDs are just being like shipped to like Japan and be sold in a record store there, and they sell. Or
Yeah.
because there's somebody there who's just
They're
like
from America, and it's like this thing that they can't have, and it's like this cool. Like, I mean, imagine seeing like a weird Japanese indie rock band or a punk band in your local store. You'd be like, whoa,
yeah.
like that's $20. I guess I have to get it. Like this is
Right.
gonna be cool. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's something you could never get or hear otherwise. And that's what it's all about. It's like just kind of cool,
Which I guess is why we should say never talk shit on something on the internet. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe don't do it. Just like I think again, going to full circle after watching the documentary again, it was maybe because of the year we just had, but like how much positivity they were trying to do. Like, let's just have a good time. Let's not have violence. Let's not, be racist. Let's not do these things that we all kind of. This is like 1989. This sounds like we're talking about today. Like this was not normal in 1989. Like this was the safe space that people like this could go and make weird art, and they did some weird shit in that place, but just to try to enjoy some stuff, make some fun art. Who cares?
Yeah.
Make a record while you're stuck at home during a pandemic.
Absolutely.
In a election that could go crazy and insurrection encaps it. Make a record.
Why don't you tell people where we can get that record?
Yeah, so Bandcamp is preferred, of course, because they're awesome. So Bandcamp, you can just go to, my label is Cherub Records. So cherubrecords.com will take you to the Bandcamp. PJ Sykes on Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. You can get it that way. It's on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube and all the other places that you Pandora. I jokingly, this is why you don't joke right here. I jokingly found searching it that it's on Pandora because I just distributed it everywhere, and I'm like, who listens to Pandora anymore? I guess whoever started listening to Pandora when it came out and just didn't stop, I guess. Like people who still use iTunes or something. And I tweeted it out, and somebody was super excited, and they listened to it and they shared it, and like, okay, don't make fun of it, man. People listen to it there. That's fine. I don't care. Just get it wherever you get it. Like, that's fine with me. If you do want to know the preference, it's Bandcamp because it is directly to me, and you can get a CD there if you want a CD.
Absolutely. We'll include links to that in the show notes. And lastly, we like to ask our guests to shout out a nonprofit or a charity that they would like our listeners to look into or donate to. Yeah,
it's Pride Month still when this airs, and even if it's not, you should do this. It's Quality Virginia, and they just lobby and do all kinds of great things to make sure that we're doing as good as we can here in Virginia. And they've been around for a long time, and they do great work. It's a really good, if you're going to advocate for a group of people, this is the kind of place that you want to send money to when you don't know where to send money, for Pride Month or something like that. Equality Virginia is a good place to do that.
Awesome. And I'll include links to that too in the show notes. Man, thank you so much for doing the show. This is a great conversation.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'm glad that we got to talk about something that was a little, maybe not a huge hit, something to have conversation about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think we talked a lot for a record that I didn't know anything about prior to this episode. There was plenty to say.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, like, what's there to say about the Pixies, or that hasn't already been said about, whatever, Nirvana, Bleach.
Yeah. I'm sure we could all find something, but would it have been something that hasn't already been? Yeah, you're right. Hasn't already been done 100 times before.
Yeah,
so.
I'm sure every 5 years they re-release it, and like, it's the 25th anniversary. Now it's the 30th anniversary, 35th anniversary. You got to get the 40th anniversary.
You want to hear my thoughts on Doolittle by the Pixies? Subscribe to our Patreon.
Yeah,
because that's where I'm going to talk about it.
That's a band that I never really quite got into it because it was kind of hyped up too much.
Yeah.
And I just never got into it. I don't know why. They're great. They're a great band, but you know.
We get to have the hindsight, like, of picking and choosing their discography, too. We don't necessarily have to be like, oh, every record they released is fucking incredible, which we know is not true. That's not true for most bands, you know?
I like that they're still on their reunion tour. And they've probably been on the reunion tour longer than they have been a band before that now.
I mean,
I saw...
reunited in Francis using the name and playing those songs.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of like weird. And a lot of bands
Kim
do that. Like
is done.
she
Kim's
stopped a
done.
few years ago when
But I
Breeders
think the
picked
rest
back
of
up.
them are still there, right? Santiago and the drummer.
I would just rather see Frank Black do his Frank Black thing and play Pixie songs.
Yeah.
You know, I think I would be more excited about that personally.
I
It's
saw
basically the
that
same, but-
Doolittle like tour where they played it from beginning to end. It was fun. They played all the other hits from the other records too.
Oh, that's like, it's kind of like the question people give out, like the solo record versus Hoax Hunters. Like, will more people come see me as a solo artist? Probably, because my name is more recognizable. But like, it's the same show.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the band will probably have some of the same people in it. You know, or people that are just outside the circle of what the band was before. It's you know.
Yeah.
But if I put Hoax Hunters on it, will people show up? Maybe not. You know,
Yeah.
maybe a reunion of Hoax Hunters would do better than my own thing in a few years. It's weird. Like,
Who knows?
who knows?
It's all just guessing. Basically.
It's all guessing, and it's kind of silly. But I'll play the Hoax Hunters songs probably if I play live, because
Right.
only one record. I have a bunch of other songs I could play.
Yeah.